Minutes we have left of the space, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Wilson to just give a few brief points, sort of relating the things we've talked about today to things that are going on in Tucson right here.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm not known to limit my talking to 10 minutes. Indigenous peoples, we're oral speakers. We're oral. Anyway, I brought that poem, Who Killed Raymond Matias? It was fear who bought the bullets. It was racism who loaded the gun. It was hatred who pulled the trigger. But let me acknowledge first, I'm wearing red to acknowledge and recognize the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. That initiative came from the First Nations of Canada. So thank you for your leadership. I brought that, there you are, snuck up on me. I was hesitant to bring it because I had the fear that I would muddy the waters. But when I looked at the title, Symposium on Conservation, Racism, and Indigenous Peoples Human Rights. If we can't talk about this here, what are we doing? What are we doing here? This is precisely the place that we need to talk about this. For those of you that don't know the context, the killing of Raymond Matias, a Knox tribal member, we're coming upon the first year anniversary, April 18th. There was a domestic issue on the reservation. The tribal police responded. The tribal police called for backup. Who did they call? Not another tribal police officer, the United States Border Patrol. 12 Border Patrol agents responded in force. 3 of them opened fire on Raymond Matias. Hit him 9 times. He died in front of his family, in front of his house. And those Border Patrol agents got off scot-free. The reason I brought this up, because I was motivated. I'm an eternal student. I still take copious notes. And I took notes concerning racism, the mechanism by which the state exercises the right to make, live, or let die. State has the sovereign right to kill. That's precisely the point when it comes to people of color, but specifically Indigenous people like Raymond Matias. Did you know that there is a Supreme Court decision? It's called qualified immunity. Supreme Court decision, which protects law enforcement, that they cannot be prosecuted in most instances. So this is what happened to Raymond Matias. Those 3 Border Patrol agents opened fire. He was hit at least 9 times. We don't know if the Knox police officer also fired. They're not saying. But this goes to my point about the state power. The state power against Indigenous people. What recourse do we have? Because this is we the people versus the state. County, state, city in some cases, tribal. The Knox tribal government did nothing, absolutely nothing, to advocate on behalf of Raymond Matias. And so the question I'm always asked is, Mike, why is the Border Patrol, the United States Border Patrol, an awesome country? I thought you were a sovereign nation. It's what I call the myth of sovereignty. If we're a sovereign country, why does law enforcement, Border Patrol, in the first place, why is it even in Indian country? And two, why does it have primary law enforcement jurisdiction above and beyond the tribal police department? So these are the questions that we need to ask when we're talking about racism. And I wrote this poem last year. I was in Brussels during the 4th of July weekend. I was at a film festival of a film that I was in that was showing in Brussels. And there was a killing in Paris by the Paris Police Department of a French citizen of Arab Muslim background. He was murdered by the police. There were riots in Paris. And I said, oh, this is global. It's not just George Floyd. Okay, when it comes to people of color, if you're Black, if you're brown, if you're indigenous, this is what we have to contend with. And what recourses do we have for self-protection? Zero. Again, the power of the state. And I've been saying for more than 20 years that the Tohono O'odham nation is a microcosm. If we're not careful for the emergence of a police state in the United States. Because again, Border Patrol en masse. You know, they're supposed to be protecting the border. But what happens, my question is, why is the Border Patrol responding to domestic issues? It's not, I'm sure it's nowhere in their mission statement. It's the power of the state. The power of the federal state versus a tribal government which receives federal appropriations every year. So the tribal government is not going to risk losing federal funds coming to the nation. They're not going to speak in opposition to the Border Patrol's presence on the nation or systemic human rights violations against tribal citizens. I put out water on the nation for 12 years. At one time, I had as many as 10 water stations on the Tohono O'odham nation. As a tribal member, they didn't like what I was doing, but they couldn't deny what I was doing, or they couldn't stop me from what I was doing. They would have liked to. Because the social justice community, No More Deaths, and the other groups, they never contested the tribe's authority to limit humanitarian aid on tribal lands. So I did that for 12 years. And so this is why I developed this conflict between United States Border Patrol, which is the face of the federal government. It's not separate. It's the power of the state versus civil society members like me, solitary civil society members. So what strength do we have when it comes to human rights violations? Very little, if any. So this is why I take the opportunity to interject myself in these public conversations. So let me end there and I'll take a question or two before we conclude, before she takes out the hook.
Any questions? I just wanted to
Yeah.
comment that we know that the ICE Border Patrol is also committing violations against a lot of Indigenous people that are trying to cross that border from Latin America too.
Yeah, that's interesting you said that. You remind me. They're committing human rights violations against Indigenous people coming. When I first started putting out water in 2002, there were many Indigenous people from Chiapas. Here's the humiliation, and I'm speaking as an autumn, as a Native American. Indigenous people from Chiapas dying for lack of a cup of water on indigenous lands in America. Do you see the moral hypocrisy there? We as indigenous people, we were once the oppressed, and now we are the oppressors. I estimate that probably 50% of migrant deaths in the Sonora Desert are on Tohono O'odham land. And nobody says anything. Do I have another hour?
Tomorrow, back. Okay, any other questions for Mike?
More just a statement. Are you aware of like what's happening in Texas right now with the border and our governor trying to take over authority?
Yeah, he raised the question of states' rights. That the governor is declaring that Texas has the sovereign right to seal the border and stop this invasion. You know, in the 1960s, segregationists in the South were claiming sovereign rights to maintain segregation. They were claiming states' rights. So this is precisely what this reminds me of. And that didn't pass then, and it's not going to pass now, because only the federal government is in the immigration business. But don't get me started.